The hushed anticipation in the global conference hall was almost a physical presence. Experts from every corner of the world sat forward, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their screens, waiting for the next speaker. Then, without warning, the main display flickered, replacing the conference logo with something entirely different. A collective gasp rippled through the room. On screen, in breathtaking detail, was an architectural rendering. It wasn't just any building, it was unmistakably the Third Temple, rendered with such precision that every arch, every column, every intricate carving seemed to shimmer with an ancient promise. Disbelief was the initial reaction, a murmuring that swelled and then died down into a chilling silence as its authenticity was confirmed. This wasn't some artist's conceptual piece. This was a leaked design, complete and terrifyingly real. Across the room, a powerful, influential figure, known for their vocal opposition to anything smacking of religious fervor, let out a short, contemptuous laugh that cut through the silence like a razor. Their face, usually composed, was now contorted in a sneer. "A child's fantasy," they scoffed, their voice echoing through the suddenly too quiet hall. Another desperate attempt to drag us back to the dark ages of superstition and myth. Their words, laced with disdain for ancient prophecies and the deeply held beliefs of millions, revealed a profound disrespect that made many in the room visibly uncomfortable. They spoke of progress, of rationality, dismissing the centuries-old yearning for the temple's return as nothing more than dangerous fanaticism. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. As a scholar who had dedicated my life to biblical prophecy, to understanding the intricate threads connecting past and future, their words were a personal affront, but I didn't react outwardly. Instead, a quiet, calculated resolve settled over me, a glint in my eye that suggested a deeper understanding, a knowledge that went far beyond their cynical pronouncements. They saw only stone and ancient texts. I saw the unfolding of a divine plan. As their mockery subsided, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor rippled through the room. It was faint, barely noticeable, but the lights above flickered, a brief power fluctuation that made the screens momentarily dim. It was a momentary, unsettling disruption, hinting at unseen forces stirred by their dismissive words. The air seemed to thicken, a strange pressure building. A short, poignant phrase, one I had heard whispered in ancient texts and quiet studies, echoed in my mind. For every word spoken against the divine, the very foundations tremble. The screen faded to black, but the image of the Third Temple rendering lingered, superimposed with a single, unblinking eye, watching. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. My own path, the one that led me to that conference room, began far from the polished halls of academia, in a small, ancient village nestled deep within the Judean hills. It was a place where time seemed to move differently, measured not by clocks, but by the rhythm of the seasons and the echoes of ancient hymns. The air tasted of dust and the sweet, earthy scent of olive groves, a fragrance that still brings a wave of nostalgia. Narrow, winding streets, paved with stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, led to homes carved into the very rock of the hills. Every morning, the first rays of the sun would paint the arid landscape in hues of gold and amber, illuminating a world where daily life was deeply intertwined with biblical studies and family traditions. Our connection to the land and its history wasn't just academic, it was woven into the fabric of our existence. My family, for generations, had been scholars and keepers of ancient texts, their lives dedicated to understanding and preserving the prophecies that spoke of a future yet to come. Our home, though simple, was a treasure trove of knowledge, filled with parchment scrolls, faded maps, and commentaries passed down through the ages. The walls seemed to breathe with the wisdom of our ancestors. Discussions about the temple's return weren't abstract theological debates. They were common dinner-table conversations, spoken of not as a distant, improbable dream, but as a tangible, inevitable future. It was simply a matter of when, not if. I was a quiet, studious child, often lost in the pages of those ancient texts, finding solace and purpose in their intricate narratives. While other children played in the dusty village squares, I was often found poring over genealogies and prophetic timelines, tracing the threads of history and destiny. I wasn't the most outgoing or boisterous, and often felt overlooked by my peers, but the scrolls offered a different kind of companionship, a world where my quiet nature was an asset, allowing me to delve deeper into the mysteries they held. My world was one of faith, anticipation, and an unshakable belief in the unfolding of a divine plan. As I grew, however, the world beyond our village began to assert its influence. News from the outside, filtered through crackling radio waves and rare newspapers, brought with it the growing voice of the influential figure. Their pronouncements against what they termed religious fundamentalism and the dangers of biblical literalism began to appear more frequently in international news. They spoke with a sharp, articulate cynicism, dismissing any belief in ancient prophecies as archaic and potentially destabilizing. Their words, delivered with a chilling certainty, painted a picture of a future where faith was a relic, a dangerous anachronism. This early exposure to such a starkly differing worldview created a profound emotional backdrop for me. It was a clash of titans, though I didn't fully comprehend it at the time. My upbringing, steeped in reverence for prophecy and the sacred, stood in direct opposition to their secular, dismissive rhetoric. It was like two different languages, two entirely separate understandings of reality, beginning to collide. These early encounters, though indirect, sowed the seeds of future conflict, laying the groundwork for a long-standing ideological battle where faith and secularism were on an unyielding collision course, preparing me unknowingly for the confrontation that would define my life's work. The tremor in that conference room, the flickering lights, were not just a random occurrence, they were a continuation of a much older, deeper struggle. The quiet battles of my youth and early academic life were just the prelude to a deeper, more insidious conflict. As I progressed through my academic career, the influential figure's shadow grew longer, reaching into the very institutions where I sought to further my understanding of temple eschatology. I remember countless instances where my research, meticulously gathered and rigorously analyzed, was met with veiled condescension or outright dismissal by academic committees. These were not open confrontations, but rather subtle rejections, often couched in terms of lack of contemporary relevance or insufficient empirical data. Yet I knew deep down that these were broken promises, instances where my work was being ridiculed not for its academic merit, but because it dared to touch upon truths that the prevailing secular worldview, heavily influenced by the antagonist, sought to ignore or discredit. There were moments of veiled humiliation too. I recall a seminar where a junior colleague, an obvious protege of the influential figure, subtly undermined my presentation on ancient temple rituals by framing it as a quaint, almost superstitious historical curiosity rather than a living prophetic tradition. His words, delivered with a smug, almost pitying smile, stung more than any direct insult. In academic journals, reviews of my papers often contained phrases like interesting if somewhat anachronistic, or rooted in an overly literal interpretation of texts, clearly echoing the antagonist's public disdain for biblical literalism. These weren't outright attacks, but subtle, continuous chipping away at my credibility, portraying my life's work as fringe, irrational, something to be politely tolerated but ultimately disregarded. It was a constant, low-level hum of invalidation that slowly but surely eroded my professional confidence. The antagonist, with their considerable influence, was a master of strategic manipulation of media narratives. Any discussion of the Third Temple, even purely academic or historical, was quickly spun into a dangerous geopolitical provocation. Their carefully crafted public statements, amplified by their allies in the press, painted a picture of zealots eager to ignite global conflict, effectively isolating any perspective that differed from their own. This made it increasingly difficult to secure platforms for my research, as institutions became wary of being associated with anything that could be labeled controversial or incendiary. I remember specific moments of injustice that, at the time, felt like isolated setbacks, but now, looking back, form a clear pattern. Funding for an archaeological dig I was coordinating focused on unearthing remnants of Second Temple-era structures that might inform future reconstruction, mysteriously dried up after a series of the antagonist's public speeches condemning any religious encroachment on the Temple Mount. Invitations to prestigious international conferences where I hoped to present groundbreaking findings were inexplicably rescinded, often with vague excuses about scheduling conflicts or reprioritization of themes. These weren't coincidences. Each instance was a direct consequence of the antagonist's relentless campaign, a systematic effort to silence dissenting voices and control the narrative. These events, though seemingly minor in isolation, were the continuous erosion of my professional and personal convictions. They built a profound sense of being constantly under siege, of fighting an unseen enemy whose influence permeated every corner of my academic and public life. It was a slow, grinding process, a constant battle against a tide of dismissive rhetoric and subtle sabotage. The world outside our village, the one I had ventured into with such hope and intellectual curiosity, was proving to be far more hostile than I could have imagined. The initial dismissive act in Part 1, the antagonist's contemptuous laugh and their scornful words, was not an isolated incident. It was not a sudden explosion of anger or a spontaneous outburst. Instead, it was the culmination of years of systemic invalidation, a lifetime of ideological warfare waged against my beliefs and my very being. That moment in the conference room, when they mocked the blueprint of the Third Temple, was the final public blow after decades of quiet battles, of enduring subtle slights and overt rejections. My calculated, quiet reaction, that glint in my eye, was not just professional composure. It was the hardened resolve of someone who had suffered years of intellectual and emotional assault. Someone who understood the true depth of their opposition and who knew, with an unshakable certainty, that truth would ultimately prevail. The geopolitical climate surrounding Jerusalem, already a delicate balance, became increasingly volatile. Discussions about the temple's construction, once confined to scholarly journals and hushed religious gatherings, now exploded into mainstream media. Satellite imagery, often grainy but undeniably clear, began circulating, showing preparatory work near the Temple Mount. There were images of heavy machinery, new access roads, and what appeared to be initial excavations. These visual confirmations, though often downplayed by official sources, fueled public speculation and ignited a global debate that transcended religious boundaries. International diplomatic crises erupted with alarming frequency. Every proposed change to the status quo of the holy sites, no matter how minor, was met with fierce opposition and often led to heated exchanges between nations. Resolutions were drafted and vetoed, emergency sessions of international bodies were convened, and the air was thick with accusations and counter-accusations. The very idea of the temple, once a spiritual longing, had become a flashpoint for global discord, a symbol of everything that could potentially go wrong in an already fractured world. During this period of heightened tension, the influential figure, now a truly prominent international voice, amplified their rhetoric. They used every available platform, from news interviews to powerful speeches at global forums, to portray the temple's construction as a direct and imminent threat to global peace. Their message was clear and uncompromising. This was not a matter of faith, but a dangerous provocation that would inevitably lead to apocalyptic conflict. Their warnings became more dire, their tone more aggressive, systematically creating a climate of fear and suspicion around the very idea of the temple. They painted a picture of religious zealots driving the world towards an unimaginable catastrophe, and their words resonated with a secular world already wary of religious extremism. I felt the increasing pressure, not just from the influential figure's relentless campaign, but from the global community swayed by their narrative. The rational academic approach I had always taken felt insufficient against such a powerful, emotionally charged message. My carefully constructed arguments, rooted in historical fact and textual analysis, seemed to crumble under the weight of their fear-mongering. It was like trying to argue with a hurricane, where logic was irrelevant in the face of overwhelming force. The weight of judgment from former colleagues became almost unbearable. Some who had once respected my academic rigor now viewed my continued dedication to temple eschatology as dangerous or at best fanatical. They saw me as an extremist, someone contributing to the global instability that the influential figure so eloquently warned against. Family members, particularly those less steeped in the ancient traditions, expressed concern, their eyes reflecting a mixture of love and fear. They would ask, Is this truly worth it? Is this what God wants, to bring such trouble upon the world? Their questions, born of genuine worry, cut deeper than any academic dismissal. Neighbors, who had known me since childhood, began to whisper. Their glances held a new kind of scrutiny, a subtle shift from familiarity to apprehension. Even close friends, some of whom had shared countless hours poring over ancient texts with me, began to distance themselves. They feared association with such a controversial topic, worried about the professional and social repercussions of being linked to someone seen as advocating for a potentially destabilizing project. Invitations to social gatherings became less frequent, conversations grew strained, and a subtle but undeniable wall began to rise between me and the community I had always called home. This period was the peak of emotional suffocation. I felt isolated and profoundly misunderstood. My life's work, once a source of quiet intellectual fulfillment, had now become a source of global anxiety, making me an unwitting pariah. The burden of centuries of prophecy, the weight of a truth that seemed increasingly unwelcome in the modern world, pressed down on me. There were moments of profound loneliness where the path I had chosen felt like a solitary walk into an ever-deepening wilderness. Yet, even in that isolation, a stubborn resolve flickered within me. The seeds of truth, once planted, could not be easily uprooted, no matter how strong the winds of opposition. The world seemed to hold its breath, teetering on the edge of an abyss, when suddenly a crack appeared in the edifice of doubt. Far from the political debates and academic squabbles, in a remote, dust-choked cave nestled deep within the unforgiving landscape of the Judean desert, a crucial archaeological discovery was made. It was a find that would not only reshape the global conversation, but also irrevocably alter the course of history. A team of dedicated, often overlooked archaeologists, toiling under the relentless desert sun, unearthed an ancient scroll. This was no ordinary scroll. Its parchment, brittle with age but remarkably preserved, unrolled to reveal not just text, but intricate, detailed architectural plans. These were not vague sketches or symbolic representations. They were precise blueprints, complete with measurements, material specifications, and construction instructions for the Third Temple. Every detail, from the layout of the courtyards to the design of the Holy of Holies, aligned perfectly, down to the minutest specification, with the ancient biblical prophecies I had dedicated my life to studying. It was as if a forgotten architect had left behind a complete guide, waiting for the precise moment of its rediscovery. But the scroll held more than just architectural marvels. Buried within its ancient Hebrew script was a previously unknown, forgotten prophecy. This section detailed not only the methods of construction, but also the exact timing and the specific signs that would precede the temple's reconstruction. And as I pored over the translation, my heart hammering in my chest, I realized with a chilling certainty that these signs were now undeniably unfolding around us. The geopolitical turmoil, the global debate, the very pressures I had endured, they were all part of the intricate tapestry woven by this ancient forgotten text. The scroll was not merely a historical artifact, it was a living, breathing testament to the unfolding of divine will. News of the scroll's discovery spread like wildfire, reaching the influential figure with predictable swiftness. Their reaction was immediate and extreme, a desperate lashing out against an inconvenient truth. They launched an unprecedented public attack, not just on the scroll itself, but on the very integrity of the discovery. In a series of frantic press conferences and televised interviews, they attempted to discredit the find, labeling it an elaborate forgery, a dangerous hoax concocted by religious fanatics to incite global conflict. Their accusations were wild, their tone increasingly shrill, accusing the archaeological team, and by extension me, of being nothing more than agents of chaos, manipulating ancient texts for nefarious purposes. Their desperation was palpable. The carefully constructed narrative they had woven for years, painting any discussion of the temple as dangerous fundamentalism, was now unraveling before the world's eyes. Their public outbursts, once seen as authoritative warnings, now reeked of panic. They inadvertently drew more attention to the scroll, fueling curiosity rather than stifling it. Each furious denouncement, each baseless accusation, only served to cast more doubt on their own credibility, revealing the cracks in their seemingly unshakable authority. The more they protested, the more the world began to question their motives, and the more the scroll's authenticity seemed to shine through their desperate attempts at obfuscation. This was the turning point I had unknowingly waited for, the moment when years of quiet suffering and steadfast belief would finally find their voice. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, the ancient scroll that spoke directly to the present, I knew I could no longer remain silent. The time for academic debate and subtle resistance was over. I made the decision to go public with the scroll's contents, to present its truth to the world, defying all previous threats and the immense pressures that had weighed me down for so long. This was the moment I broke the cycle of suffering and silence. It was a conscious choice to expose the truth, no matter the personal cost, no matter the storm it would undoubtedly unleash. The fear that had once clung to me, the isolation that had become my constant companion, began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. I was no longer just a scholar. I was a messenger, entrusted with a truth that transcended personal comfort or safety. The stage was set for a monumental shift in global consciousness, and I, the quiet scholar from the Judean hills, was about to play a central role. The revelation of the ancient scroll, its detailed blueprints and forgotten prophecy laid bare, sent shockwaves across the globe. It wasn't merely news. It was an earthquake that rattled the foundations of geopolitics, faith, and secular reason. My decision to go public had unleashed a torrent of reactions, and I found myself at the epicenter of a global maelstrom. The scrutiny was intense, a bewildering mix of awe from those who saw divine intervention, skepticism from the scientific community, and outright hostility from those who perceived it as a dangerous provocation. Every word I spoke, every historical detail I presented, was dissected, debated, and often distorted. I felt a dizzying array of emotions. There were moments of profound clarity, a quiet satisfaction in finally bringing this truth to light, but these were often overshadowed by a gnawing fear. Had I done the right thing? Was the world truly ready for such a revelation? Doubts, like insidious whispers, began to creep in. I questioned my own resolve, the immense responsibility weighing heavily on my shoulders, the shame of being labeled a fanatic, a destabilizing force which I had fought against for so long threatened to resurface. My life's mission, once a solitary academic pursuit, had become a public spectacle, and the weight of biblical history seemed to rest, quite literally, on me. However, amidst the chaos, unexpected alliances began to form. A coalition of international religious leaders, men and women from diverse faiths who had often found themselves at odds, united in support of the scroll's authenticity. They recognized the ancient patterns, the undeniable resonance with their own traditions, and saw in the scroll a common thread of divine purpose. Their collective voice, once fragmented, now spoke with a powerful, unified conviction, lending immense moral weight to the discovery. Former colleagues, many of whom had distanced themselves during my years of isolation, now stepped forward. Their initial skepticism had been replaced by genuine intellectual curiosity, and after rigorous examination, they lent their academic weight, their reputations, and their expertise to validating the scroll. Their methodical analysis, their peer-reviewed papers, and their public statements provided a crucial counter-narrative to the accusations of forgery. Conversely, the influential figures' camp solidified, revealing themselves as undeniable enemies of the prophecy. They launched coordinated disinformation campaigns, flooding social media and news outlets with manufactured controversies, attempting to sow doubt and confusion. They initiated legal challenges, questioning the provenance of the scroll, the archaeological methods, and even my right to present such findings. Their attacks became more personal, more venomous, as their carefully constructed secular worldview crumbled under the undeniable weight of the evidence. It was a desperate, ugly fight, but their increasingly aggressive tactics only served to highlight their desperation and the intellectual bankruptcy of their arguments. The cultural dynamics of the region, so often misunderstood by the outside world, played a crucial role in how the news was received. Local communities, particularly those in the Judean hills, had lived for generations with the whispers of prophecy embedded in their daily lives. For them, the scroll was not a shock, but a confirmation, a pragmatic acceptance of a future they had always believed was coming. Their reaction was less about abstract theological debate and more about an ancient promise finally being fulfilled. In contrast, Western nations grappled with the profound implications for secular governance, international law, and the delicate balance of power. The very idea of a biblically mandated construction project in such a volatile region challenged their established frameworks, forcing uncomfortable conversations about faith's role in a modern world. The psychological impact on me was profound. There were moments of pure exhilaration, a deep satisfaction in seeing the truth emerge from the shadows, but these highs were invariably followed by overwhelming anxiety, the constant awareness of the global stage, the monumental stakes. Sleep became a luxury, my mind racing with the enormity of it all. I was no longer just a scholar, I was a conduit, a vessel for a truth that transcended my own individual existence. The world, irrevocably changed by this ancient text, was now forced to confront a reality previously confined to ancient texts and whispered prayers. It was a new dawn, fraught with challenges, but undeniably alive with a profound sense of purpose. The global community, after months of intense debate, meticulous verification, and the undeniable weight of both historical and archaeological evidence, finally acknowledged the scroll's authenticity. The unfolding prophecy, once relegated to the fringe of academic discussion, now stood as a verifiable, imminent reality. International bodies, initially hesitant and wary of the geopolitical ramifications, began the arduous process of facilitating a peaceful, supervised framework for the Third Temple's construction. This involved navigating an intricate web of international law, religious sensitivities, and the political will of numerous nations. It was a testament to the scroll's power that such complex challenges, which once seemed insurmountable, were slowly, painstakingly overcome. Negotiations were delicate, agreements fragile, but the momentum of a prophesied future proved to be an unstoppable force. During this period, the influential figures' influence waned dramatically. Their earlier dismissals, once powerful and persuasive, were now exposed as unfounded, rooted in a cynical manipulation of public opinion rather than genuine intellectual inquiry. Their desperate attempts to suppress the truth, to discredit the scroll and its proponents, had failed spectacularly. Each public outburst, each coordinated disinformation campaign, only served to highlight their increasing desperation and intellectual bankruptcy. The global stage, once their domain, began to shrink, their once resonant voice now sounding hollow and out of touch. The influential figure faced public disgrace and professional ruin. Their legacy, once defined by academic prestige and political power, became forever tainted by their vehement opposition to a verifiable prophecy. Universities rescinded honorary degrees, former allies distanced themselves, and the media, once their willing mouthpiece, now reported on their downfall with a detached, almost clinical precision. Their attempts to maintain power and discredit the truth were ultimately futile, leading to their complete marginalization from the global stage. It was a stark, undeniable consequence, a public reckoning that demonstrated unequivocally that truth, however inconvenient or challenging, ultimately prevails over cynical manipulation and ideological stubbornness. The world had witnessed the grand failure of a worldview that denied the sacred, and the influential figure became a cautionary tale for generations to come. I, the narrator, stood as a quiet witness to this monumental unfolding of biblical history. My life's work, once ridiculed and dismissed, was now validated on a scale I could never have imagined. The long years of quiet study, the moments of despair when it seemed my voice was utterly alone, the constant pressure from the influential figure's relentless campaign against me, all of it now seemed part of a larger divine tapestry. There was no triumphalism, only a profound sense of awe and a quiet, abiding gratitude. I had persevered not out of anger or a desire for personal vindication, but out of an unwavering faith in the ancient texts I had dedicated my life to understanding. My reflection on this incredible journey was often a solitary one, overlooking the developing construction site from a quiet vantage point in the Judean hills. The ground, once merely earth, was now hallowed, buzzing with the purposeful activity of builders from across the world. The first stones were being meticulously laid for the third temple, each one a testament not to fear, but to fulfilled prophecy and renewed hope. It was a tangible manifestation of a future long foretold, a bridge between the ancient past and a world forever changed. The air, once heavy with the weight of conflict and skepticism, now carried the faint echoes of ancient hymns, blending with the sounds of construction. This was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new era, leaving all who witnessed it with a profound sense of awe and wonder. A world finally forced to confront the sacred,